If you push too much, you might unleash the beast.
Hello and welcome to IGN here at Gamescom. Matt and I have just seen a hands-off demo of Dying Light The Beast, which was recently revealed at ONL last night. Now, we got about, 30 minutes of game time?
Yeah.
Didn't see a whole lot, but I guess the first thing that they mentioned was it was originally a DLC pack for Dying Light 2.
Yeah, so much so that actually if you own the Dying Light 2 Ultimate Edition, this game is going to be free for you. So it was going to be a DLC, and then they had like a massive leak, which meant that all the narrative kind of got spoilt for a lot of people. So they were like, what we're going to do is we're going to completely change what this is, going to go back to the start, and we're going to make a whole new DLC that then turned into a standalone game. And that's what The Beast is. And it kind of, if you're a Dying Light fan, it goes right back to the start of the story in some respects.
Yeah, so it's a return of the original protagonist, but he's been held captive by the Baron for the last 10 years, but he's escaped. But he is now the Beast. That means he's got superpowers, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But for the first part of the demo, it was very much like Dying Light, business as usual, parkouring across the city as the sun was slowly setting in the evening.
Yeah, so you're definitely not the character that you were in Dying Light 2, and that means there are slight differences. So Dying Light 2, it's parkour, very much made use of kind of like a paraglider. They didn't show anything like this. I think you will be completely, I say boots on the ground, but the boots quite often aren't on the ground in parkour. But also when kind of like it came to night, there was no suggestion that you're infected and you can only stay out at night for a certain amount of time. There was no immunity meter. So I think at night, it's kind of like, just do as much as you want. Just make sure you don't get spotted, because as is the typical thing for Dying Light, when the lights go out, everything gets much harder.
Yeah, so we got a glimpse of one of the sort of superpowers that you have, and it's almost like, I guess, X-ray. So if you sit still, crouch down, you can see where the enemies are moving around, and that means like when you've got some of the really bad freaks that you want to avoid, it makes it a lot easier. But then one of the things that you very quickly did, you find solace in the safe houses that are dotted around the map. Obviously, it's an open world game, so you got to go and find those. And there were some simple puzzles to kind of get that up and running. You had to find the power fuse to make sure there was energy, which powered the UV rays, because the UV rays keeps the infected away. So that was pretty basic stuff that we've seen in Dying Light before. And then the next day, when it was morning, we woke up, and I thought it looked quite different. It's a very rural area compared to what we've seen in previous Dying Lights.
Yeah, kind of like Dying Light 2 was very much set in, you started in an old town and you moved into new town, and that, whilst it was set in Europe, had kind of very elements of old European towns into more modern architecture. There were skyscrapers, whereas it's sort of set in a rural village. There's a lot more kind of trees. There's a railway track that runs into that village. So it does feel more kind of like on the outskirts of civilization, which will obviously impact what parkour elements that we can use. Hopefully not too much. I'm hoping there's still plenty of rooftops to run around. Certainly seemed like it. But yeah, it had a different vibe to that environment than what Dying Light 2 is.
And then so shortly after, basically the goal of this very early mission was to go and find the Baron, who is hiding out in a factory on the outskirts of town. You get there and there are a lot of guards. And up until this point, the game has very much been play stealth.
Yeah.
And you take it easy because you're massively outnumbered. But it very quickly turns, because you take one of the guys out, you grab his assault rifle, and then it basically became a shooter. Yeah,
it's quite an unusual direction. So Dying Light 2 fans will know that earlier this year they did the firearms update, which brought a variety of actual kind of like, gun weapons into the game. If you know about those, you'll be quite familiar with the guns that are in this version of Dying Light. But yeah, I'd say about half of the demo that we watched, it wasn't the melee kind of focused zombie killing game that we're used to with Dying Light. This was a shooter. They promised that it's not turned into a full-bore shooter, but what they were showing was a full-bore shooter, and not a bad-looking one by any means.
There was a whole section where you're clearing out the inside of this factory against half a dozen guards, where you've got a shotgun, you've got an assault rifle, you've got grenades, and that's very different. The crunchy melee combat is still there. Yeah. It feels very much still like Dying Light, but once you've got a gun, there's no limit on ammo really, or there didn't seem to be.
Yeah, they ran out of ammo by the end of the demo, but within all of the scenarios they were showing us, ammo didn't seem to be a problem in the way that I would have assumed it would be for a Dying Light, but also all of the enemies had guns, so we're shifting from a game where you've got zombies that don't shoot you because they're brain dead, and there were kind of like, you're going up against kind of rebel groups and sort of scavengers, and they might have had kind of some intelligence to use guns, but you're going up against the Baron's actual armed forces, which means that all of the encounter design is suddenly very, very different. And as I say, like, seem to be not a bad shooter. I don't know what those guns feel like because we've not played it, but I would hope that those encounters felt as solid as the melee did.
And it definitely feels like, well, it was all building up to the final encounter, which is against the new strain of the freaks called the Behemoth. It's this huge guy with, you know, mega muscles. You can throw cars, you can throw rocks. He does a ground pound that shoots across the floor. And at that point, well, you've got a few guns, a few, you know, clips of ammo, but that's, I guess, when the beast finally comes into play. And so, you know, we sat through a 30-minute demo, and in the final 5 minutes, we finally got to see an idea of what the beast actually is.
And I guess it's almost that there's a slight Bruce Banner of it, I suppose. Like, the Behemoth was very Hulk-like. It was doing Hulk smashes. And the guns were reasonably effective, but once they'd run out of ammunition, melee attacks weren't doing anything. So you can unleash the beast. Now, in Dying Light 2, your character was infected and did have beast-like powers, but they only triggered at certain story moments. It seems to me that you can trigger the beast at any time you want this time, I guess provided you built up a meter or something, but they were very familiar attacks in that you could ground pound and that would create a shockwave. You could strike out with your hands. They even showed him picking up a concrete block and hurling it at the Behemoth. And that obviously seemed to be much more effective than any assault rifle ever was going to be against this guy.
And I guess the crowning moment was when he finally tore the head off of the beast, and that was the end of the demo. I came away thinking, well, it's more Dying Light.
Yep.
It looks good, but ultimately, it's all about how good that gunplay feels, because it looks like that's such a big focus this time.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how much they've said that it's not going to turn into a gun game. What they showed us suggests that guns are much, much more key and integral to the game than they were before. And if all of that works, if the encounter design is good, then this could be an interesting spin on Dying Light. I hope it is.
So that's everything that we know about Dying Light the Beast. For everything else Gamescom, keep it locked right here at IGN.